It's like 5 o'clock this morning, you guys. But I ain't feel like getting up. But I've been looking at stuff, researching some things, looking at some stuff. But I was sitting here thinking, I was like, let me hit the loud button so I could talk to y'all real quick. So yesterday I had done a live video, right? But because I played the color purple at the beginning, I mean not the color purple, Lord God have mercy, Dream Girls, I guess they didn't like that, right? So they gave me a warning or something. Y'all know I don't even care about none of that because I ain't on here to be for profit, make no money and nothing. I come in here because I like talking to y'all. So I'll go play whatever I think is relevant to what it is I'm talking about. But I don't know. I guess they didn't like that I did that. So they gave me a warning. So I had to cut that part out and I re-uploaded the video. And usually I probably I wouldn't have uploaded the video. But the reason I did was because I was discussing some information with McKenna West, that situation, right? So first, wait a minute, let me say this. Let me tell you something. I have a personality. I like everybody. I really do. I don't, there might be things and behaviors that I dislike about people, but I do find something to like about everyone. Like that's just my personality. And so even though like with Donald Trump, oh my gosh, he get on my nerves. And when people hear me talk about him, they'll think I hate him. I don't like Donald Trump. I don't. He has a history of being a racist. I never liked Donald Trump. While some people always was fooled about that, I never liked him. But there are still things that I like about him that I think are funny. Um, I have to find humor in the stuff that he does. And so that's just the type of personality I have, is that I don't ever look at people as being all horrible. Like there's something good about them, right? But I don't really have a lot of problems with people in life. Like I don't, when I see that a problem might be arising with somebody, I will do things in order to create parameters and boundaries to leave the problem where it is, right? Don't let it get no worse. Leave it on the floor where it's at, right? And I'll create the proper boundaries and safeguards so that it doesn't become a worse problem. And that's just something I was taught throughout life in order to preserve whatever relationship or whatever kindness or whatever might be left of the situation, right? Because when you notice that like a situation is going south, you don't want to, or at least for me, I don't want it to get worse. I'm not going to allow it to get worse than what it is when I notice that it's going bad. And so I will do whatever I need to do to create boundaries and create safeguards that will prevent the relationship from going down even worse. So that at the end of the day, at least like if something happens with somebody that I might not have been in great standing with, or they might not have been in great standing with me, when they leave this place, I could still find some kindness. I could still find something good that transpired between me and them. And I didn't let it go down so bad that it's like, oh, I don't even give a damn. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't never want to feel like that about anybody because life is too short to be feeling like that about people. I don't, that's not something I'm comfortable with. Like I said, my body is very particular. When I'm in places of goodness and kindness and happiness, I don't, my body is well. My body responds to those negative kind of things, and it's like a sickness. Like my body don't know how to deal with that. That's what will make me sick, is me being in a way where I'm hating someone or I'm aggravated and frustrated with someone. I really believe in the concept of when Jesus was sitting down talking to his people in the desert, right, where he was safe, teaching them parables and things of that nature. And he told them, come unto me, all who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest in my soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden are light, right? I really believe that. Some people don't. Well, that's what I mean about I know that I don't fall in the line with what some people will call traditional contemporary, none of that kind of Christianity. When I look at the scriptures, it's to help me in my life. I really look at it like that. It's to help me live just like he said. For his yoke is easy, his burdens are light. He didn't say that for no reason, right? And so I fall short all the time, but I try to center my mind back to that so that I don't ever be in these places of contention for too long, right? Things I can do something about, I do it. Things I can't, I don't, right? So that being said, Angie was over there on her channel talking about how I wake up in the morning, right? And listen, I do wake up like that in the morning. You wanna know why I wake up like that in the morning? Cause I wake up in the morning and I drink me some blueberry wild child. I wake up in the morning and I drink me some hibiscus ginger, or I drink me some lemon ginger, turmeric tea. And you wanna know why? Because there is a towel of tea, right? When I tell people to drink tea or drink juice, right? And they think I'm just saying that. I'm being honest that it is something about the things that you ingest or you put into your body. It's something about the smell and the aroma, right? And I have recognized this since I've been a kid. There's a thing, it's a thing, right? That's called the towel of tea. The towel or dial, whichever one you want to call it, it's considered like the path, right? The path. How you start your mind off is how your day is going to go, right? So, and I knew, listen, y'all, I knew like I had gotten into a phase because I can stay up late too. I can. But I need to make sure that I get a certain amount of sleep in order for me to function the next day. Now, that might only be 5 hours, right? And then I might be able to, when I get in the house and after I'm productive in the morning, because I'm going to wake up at 5:30 no matter what. That's just how I'm wired. It doesn't matter, right? I'm going to wake up at 5:30 a.m. So as long as I get to sleep maybe somewhere like around 12, sometimes even at 1 a.m., I'm still good to wake up at 5, right? And then function until I might start coming down like around 1 o'clock, but still not in a bad way. I just start coming down like, okay, I know I'm gonna need a nap. And so then I normally leave work somewhere in between 1 and 3 o'clock, right? Because now, especially now, I go into the office because uh there's some supervision that has to happen that I have to be there to oversee. So I don't necessarily have to go every day, but I like to go because this is the thing. So um at first I was adverse to going in every day, but when I started going into the office, I started to realize I'm leaving that shit at work. I'm not bringing it home. When I work at home the majority of the time, or when I was working at home the majority of the time, it was like it was never a stop. It was always something else for me to do. It was always somebody else to come to me and ask me something. It was all now, I don't have none of that. So I prefer to get up. I prefer to take that little job because I have a very short commute. And then I'm good. You know what I'm saying? I leave there and I'm done with it. And so normally I leave office like somewhere between 1 and 3 o'clock. And then I might run some errands and do some things. Or if I start to feel like I'm coming down about 2 or 3 times a week, I'll take an hour nap. I come in the house, I'll take an hour nap, and then I wake up, do what I gotta do, make dinner, come talk to you guys, whatever it is. Just my routine, because I try to keep my week on a routine so that I am as productive and I'm maximizing my potential in every capacity that I have for the week, right? So that I have to fulfill throughout the week. So, but that's what it is, y'all. I wake up and I drink me some blueberry wild child. I drink me because it puts me on a path. That's why I have so much energy in the morning. Now, some people they get it through their coffee. I am not a coffee drinker, never have been, right? The only coffee is really a utility for me. Like if I am so tired, like if I stay sleep until like if I don't go to sleep until 2, 3 a.m. in the morning and I know I gotta get up at 5 a.m., I probably still am okay with just drinking my tea or drinking my juice or whatever it is, right? But um if if I realize like I am like so sluggish. I cannot stay focused. Then I will get coffee because it's really a utility. It's nothing I enjoy. I don't enjoy drinking coffee, right? Like, even sometimes, rather than me do that, I will go to a chai tea latte or something like that. Something that's warm that will kind of like give me a sense of warmth so I could get my spirit up. But I really do. Listen, those Asians, they believe in that tea. They believe in those herbs. And I don't drink tea from a bag. I steep tea. So I steep my tea every morning. If I'm drinking juice in the morning time, throughout the day, I might have some bottled juice or whatever. But if I'm drinking juice in the morning, that juice has been pressed. Right? Like, and that's what, and it's, for me, it's not about health. It probably is healthy to do, but in my mind, it's not about like the health of my body. It's about the wellness of my spirit. It helps my spirit get a connectedness, right? Um, I don't know. So, and to make it and accomplish things throughout the day. So that's where that energy come from. It come from that blueberry wild child, girl. Right? That's where it come from. But look, I wanted to come on here because I was telling you guys about McKenna West, right? And it's the surrogate situation. So she is a resident, I believe, of Alaska. She entered into this surrogacy agreement. So, and yesterday, I was separating out for you guys in the video that I did. I was separating out the difference between um the um a surrogate, a traditional surrogate, and a gestational carrier. And I was saying that I was kind of confused, like, why would the attorney be referring to her as a surrogate, knowing that this woman was in the capacity of a gestational carrier? And this is because surrogacy is like a blanket term for this type of thing, right? It's a blanket term. But this woman was actually a gestational carrier. And the reason why is because the products of conception did not belong to her. If the egg was hers, right, and the sperm just came either from the intended father or a donor, right, then she would be considered a traditional surrogate. But because none of the products of conception belong to her, she is considered a gestational carrier, right? Some people might say gestational surrogate. That's really when you don't understand fertility. It's a whole. I tell people this all the time, and this is what makes understanding medical information difficult for a lot of people, because medical terminology is its own language. And even within different specialties, it's its own language. So if you've only worked orthopedic, if you've only worked physical therapy, if you only worked primary care, or even just OBGYN, someone who worked in OBGYN may understand more like language going into fertility, right? Because there is a connection there. But somebody who worked in orthopedic might not understand the language of OBGYN, or the language. They'll understand physical therapy. There's a connection, right? So each specialty, each body system requires its own language when discussing those matters. And even if you have a medical background, there are some things that you might not understand, because as you go through different body systems and different specialties, there's a whole nother set of language you got to learn, right? And so for those of us who are not lay people when it comes to the world of fertility, we understand that woman is a gestational carrier. McKenna West, she was a gestational carrier. Your traditional surrogate was a situation that attorney brought up in the video I played with Baby M, right? And with Baby M, it was her egg. It was the egg of the woman who was carrying the baby. And it was the sperm of the intended father. And that woman, upon delivery, was supposed to give the baby to them because they contracted to do that, right? And so, but in this situation with McKenna West, right, she contracted with them and entered into a surrogacy agreement as a contract. And the reason why these things have to be contracted, and I said it in the live that I did yesterday, these things have to be contracted is because there is no laws. There are very few laws around this type of thing. So, in order to have create something that the courts can try to litigate, mitigate in the event that something occurs and goes awry, that contract is where they try to pick up from. But the issue that the courts have, even with the contracts, is family law. Because there is some family law that can supersede and override those contracts. It's a conflict, and so there is no such thing because I watched like a few people doing content. I enjoy all the content I heard like people doing on it, and I understand like people understand from their understanding of it, and they may not know like what they need to know in order to navigate the situation. But there is no such thing as a solid contract. I heard one commentator saying something about they needed to have a better contract. There is no such thing. And the reason that there is no such thing is because there is no law surrounding this kind of thing. And so what ends up happening, all of those contracts, like I said, are like on good faith between both parties. It is good faith that you believe that both sets of individuals are going to adhere to that contract, because if not, something can happen and you can end up in court and family law might override what you agreed to in the contract. And and then the arbitrator or whoever is you go to, sometimes you might go to an arbitrator first, because in family court that's exactly what they're going to try to go to, an arbitrator to see if you guys can arbitrate the situation versus um getting to a point where a judge has to make a decision. But a lot of times if a judge ends up having to make a decision, they're going to go on what's law, not what's on your contract, if family law overrides and supersedes that contract, right? So there is no such thing as a solid surrogacy agreement and contract, because at any given time, depending on when the decision needs to be made, if there is something in that family court that overrides what you agreed to, that individual can exercise their right, and those people who are in charge of making decisions are going to more than likely make decisions according to the law, right? Um, Now, whether or not you can sue for civil damage as a result of the contract, that might be another avenue to explore. But as far as it, like the child, there are some things that contract is not going to protect, right? So I was thinking about something when it comes to McKenna, because that one attorney that let me set the stage for those who didn't watch my live. So McKenna West was a woman who, now the intended parents are not being, their identity is not being made known, right? But McKenna West is a woman who is a resident of Alaska, and she entered into a surrogacy agreement contract with a couple in California to have a baby for them and give them the baby. Obviously, it must have been something either wrong with the woman being able to carry the baby, or she just didn't want to carry a baby. You have both instances. You have instances where it might be a medical reason of why a woman cannot carry a baby. And now, because fertility is so much more common than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, women can just choose and elect to do it, right? And so I don't know which one it was, but the egg of the baby, the egg that produced the baby, right, belonged to the intended mother. The sperm that produced the baby belonged to the intended father. So this woman was a gestational carrier who was carrying this baby for this couple. And at 20 weeks, it was discovered that the baby had a heart condition that impacts the left side. I'm going to try to stay in layman's terms, right? Or at least if I do use other terms, then I'm going to break it down. So the baby had a heart condition that impacted the left side of the baby's heart that would make it not function as well, right? Um, so I'm gonna look and see. Um, I want to look and see like about how many surgeries that it might require, because I think they estimated that the baby would have to have 3 surgeries. And they're calling the baby Gabriel. So I don't know if that's the baby's real name or if that's the baby's the name that they're giving the baby because of the hold on. What? I mean, how many surgeries can a person with hyperplasia need? Okay, so it doesn't, when you search kind of to see how many surgeries, like on average, can a person with hyperplasia need, it doesn't really tell you, which means it can range. It can range. For those who who have never heard me tell the story before or who are not familiar with my channel, my nephew was born with a heart condition where his ventricles were backwards. And he passed away at the age of 9. But when he was born, they didn't even know if he was going to be able to breathe as a result of it, right? And he made it 9 years. And at the age of, I think, 11, 11 or 12, I can't remember, a child is now eligible to get a heart either from a child or from an adult. But up until that point, a child can only get a heart from another child. And so a lot of times when children are born, or they notice in utero that a baby has a heart condition that is severe, there are some OBGYNs that would recommend a termination, right? So what the intended family was facing and dealing with and making this decision is not unusual. I don't want it to be thought by people to think like, oh, they were so cold-hearted, they were having trouble having kids, and now they blessed with one, and then they decide they want the surrogate to terminate the baby, right? No. This is something that the OBGYNs normally do present to parents, even if even if it's the actual mother that's pregnant, right? The mother of the if it's just a normal pregnancy, right? Not a surrogate pregnancy, but a normal pregnancy, they will suggest potential possible, like what you could be looking at, right? A lifetime of dealing with a child having to have surgery, right? They estimated, based off of what these reports were saying, that the baby would need to have about 3 surgeries, right? To correct the situation, to attempt to correct the situation. But it could end up being a whole lot more than that. My nephew had 3 surgeries by the time he was 9 years old, right? He had a surgery as soon as he came out. They took him straight into surgery. So it is it is a hard thing, especially when you're talking about something with the heart. And that's why a lot of times there are some, probably most OBGYNs that would provide all of the information, all of the details to parents to say, hey, this is what you're looking at. Because this is the reality. There is nothing more devastating than not being able to have a child than having a child and then the child dies, right? And so there are a lot of us, I'm of this belief, And I know my sister-in-law and my brother were of this belief that they are going to let God determine that, right? But there are some people that cannot handle that. I don't know what's right or wrong. People, I don't judge it. People have to make the choice for themselves, right? I don't know what's right or wrong. I don't know what that conversation with God is like. I don't know what if I would be right or wrong depending on whichever situation whatever decision I decide to make. But what I do know is it's not an easy decision to make on either side. It's not. Like, when you are looking at a child who has a heart situation where this is bigger than just a heart condition. A heart condition alone is a problem. This is a major problem with the way that the heart functions, right? There is a function problem. And you're talking about dealing with a child that would have to continuously have to go back and forth to the hospital, might have to have long stays in the hospital. Then you're also, and a lot of times for these parents, they're not even thinking about the inconvenience it's going to cause for them. They're not. But I've seen it up close, personal. I was one of the people who stepped in the gap in the interim to give my brother and my sister-in-law time to rest. My brother and my sister-in-law did not want to leave my nephew at the hospital with anyone. They did not. But because he had to be in there for so long, they had 3 other kids. And so they were taking turns. One would be at the hospital, the other one would be at home with the other kids. And then they were doing like that. And they didn't feel comfortable. And this is the main reason why they didn't feel comfortable. And I knew this, right? They didn't feel comfortable, number one, because it was such a fragile situation. It's their child, and it's a fragile situation. But number two, anyone else that they possibly would have left my nephew in the hospital with, the doctors are going to come in at any given time, a day or night, because something could change in the status of his health throughout the day. And that would be a lot of stress on somebody else at the hospital with him. It would also mean that the person that's there would need to be able to understand what the doctors were saying so that they can translate what was said back to them. And that's why they never felt comfortable without one of them being there until I started to stay with him. When my nephew was in the hospital, all the way up to him past dying, I stayed. I'm the only person who stayed overnight with my nephew in the hospital. I'm the only one. Because I was the only one who mentally could deal with it. And I was the only one who knew the language. It had gotten to the point where my brother and my sister-in-law felt like I knew it better than them. Like, I'll let her translate it to me because they weren't understanding some of the things that the medical professionals were coming in to discuss. But I'm the only person who stayed the night to give them some relief so that they could go home at the same time with their other kids. So I would drive to New York every weekend to stay in the hospital with my nephew, all the way up until they put my nephew on the ECMO machine. Once they put my nephew on the ECMO machine, I was in New York every single day, nonstop, like until he passed away. And I was at that hospital every day. But it is a serious thing to watch. This is not something people weighing in on it. They might feel like older parents, they are ungrateful. They were having fertility issues. Why would they want to terminate the child? Because there is nothing more devastating than not being able to have a child, than having to watch a child die. There is nothing more devastating than that. And I can attest to that because my nephew, that was my nephew. I loved him like my child, but I could still not feel what his parents felt. And they knew when my nephew was in utero that he had this heart condition. So this is the situation that these parents, these intended parents, were dealing with. So when there are people who are looking at, oh, they so cold, they so heartless, like, no, as somebody who experiences, let me tell you something. This is why there are OBGYN doctors who will recommend that, because they feel like this. You can get mental health help for trying to cope with the idea of not having children. And some women can't deal with that, and they go into these deep depressions. They have this anxiety. It develops into other disorders as a result of it, mental health challenges because of it. But imagine that same woman who's already fragile in that space having a child that then now is here. She's caring for the child, and then now she's watching the child die. What do you think that's going to do to her mentally? How do you think that's going to impact her mentally? A medical professional does not, they are looking at the overall picture, right? They ain't just looking at one one view. They are looking at the total picture. And so that's where their advice is coming from, right? So, but there was something in this part, on the legal part of it, that made me think there is a loophole in the contract where maybe the intended parents were actually the ones who breached the contract. And where this, like I said, it makes it very tricky. It makes it very tricky because there's no laws behind this. There's family law that would support that the genetic link entitles those parents to the child. But this is what the surrogate said, the reason why she went to Texas to have the baby, in order to be able to protect the baby from the contract that was established in California. So like I said, she was a resident of Alaska. She entered into this agreement with the intended parents were in California. The agreement was signed and formed in California. When the parents, at 20 weeks, when this heart condition was discovered, within those 20 weeks, they decided they wanted to terminate the pregnancy. Now, in the contract, there was a clause in the contract that said that and this is in most a standard fertility contract, that this will be discussed. And then what will be done is normally outlined in the contract, in this clause, right? But there are some intended parents who say they don't care, no matter what the health status of the baby, they are going to take the baby. And so the contract is supposed to bind them to do that. That we don't want the surrogate getting a abortion. We don't want any selective reductions if it's multiple, pregnancy. All of that is outlined in the contract. If they want the surrogate to get an abortion, if they find that there is some type of what might be considered life-threatening issue with the child, or something that might alter the quality of life of the child, that is supposed to be in the contract as well, because this is something that is supposed to be discussed by the intended parents and the surrogate or gestational carrier. It's supposed to be discussed ahead of time, right? So, in this particular contract, from what I understand, there was an agreement that if something was found abnormal with the fetus, that the gestational carrier will be willing to terminate the pregnancy. If the gestational carrier got pregnant and it was a multiple pregnancy, she would be willing to do a selective reduction. And selective reduction is what I explained in my video yesterday about when they go in And I was wrong. I was wrong about the order I said it. I had to think about it for a second what I was saying. So say you have in the selective reduction, say you have 3 babies, you're pregnant with 3 babies, or you pregnant with 4 babies, right? Well, the best type of pregnancy is a singleton, not a multiple, right? So medically, we know we have better medical outcomes when it's a singleton pregnancy, right? So what would happen is when you sign that agreement to do selective reduction, if you do selective reduction because you have a multiple pregnancy, they are going to terminate the pregnancy that has the most. Say they have 2 embryos that are sharing the same sac. They are going to terminate that one and leave the singleton because the best outcome is a singleton birth, a singleton pregnancy. So they're going to terminate. So that's what selective reduction is. Selective reduction, like with Octomom, they more than likely, they probably encouraged her to do selective reduction. She refused to do it. Because then she would have been, they would have reduced down all the way, all those 8 kids to 1. Because they're not going to go in and do selective reduction and reduce you down to just 2 or 3. They are going to get rid of all of it except for 1. Because that's the best clinical outcome, right? So, the parents decided that this was already established in the contract because according to what everyone is saying, they are outlining that these were the agreements of this particular contract with McKenna West and her intended family, right? So when they found out about the heart issue at 20 weeks, right? And they decided that they wanted to terminate the pregnancy. McKenna, I'm going to relate this to something else in a minute. But McKenna looked at that like, McKenna looked at that like they breached the contract. It was a breach of contract when, because originally she had agreed to terminate. When they agreed in the contract, once that, even though the contract says this is what they will do, there is no state in the United States that is going to force McKenna to get a termination. No matter who the baby inside of her belongs to. There is no state. Because while that baby is in her body, that's her body. Right? So there is no state in the United States that's going to force that those parents could have taken her into the court and forced her to have a termination. None. Right? And that's what I mean by all surrogacy contracts are flimsy. There are no surrogacy contracts that exist that are solid. All of them are flimsy because it's based on good faith. It's based on believing that all of the individuals who agreed to these terms in the contract are going to abide by the contract. Because if we got to take this into court, it's going to be a fight because there is no law. There is limited law surrounding this, and depending on what state you go to, it's even less, and then it changes, and then it's nothing constant. It's nothing consistent. So McKenna is saying that the contract was broken at the point where she decided to not terminate the pregnancy. And they wanted her to. So essentially, she is saying her motivation in moving forward with the pregnancy and making the move and doing all of what she did was motivated by believing that the contract was broken when that intended family wanted her to terminate and she refused. And so the contract was void. This is what she's operating under this, right? She's operating under that assumption. This is going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting how this is going to come to be, how this is going to come about. Will she be required to give them back this, I think she got paid somewhere upwards of $60,000. Will they require her to pay back the $60,000? And will the idea of whoever, because in Texas, in the state of Texas, whoever births the baby is considered the mother, right? But then you have in family court paternity, maternity tests, paternity. They are, you have paternity tests, so fraternal or maternal, but paternity, right? The paternity test would confirm that the intended parents are the parents. But does the fact that the person who births the baby in the state of Texas override the paternity test? Does the paternity test override her giving birth? These are some of the conflicts that are going to be explored, because this is where law is, right? You have this contract that is flimsy, that is almost void at this point. And now you have this issue. It's void in the sense of deciding the custody of the child, right? Not on a civil level, because maybe possibly there is something that the intended parents can do on a civil level, right? But when it comes to the custody of the child in this situation, because it's different. Some people say civil or criminal. Well, you actually have a few things: civil, criminal, and custody, right? And so the custody of the child is going to be determined on established law that already exists. So what overrides what? Does the paternity of the child override who gives birth to the child in a state that says whoever gives birth is the mother, right? So McKenna gave birth. She's the one who gave birth to the child. Does that override the paternity of the child? And then when you factor in the terms of the contract, did the intended parents give up their rights to the child once they voiced to her that they wanted her to terminate the pregnancy, and then she decided that she did not want to do that? So is that them giving up their right to the child, and therefore then her having the ultimate decision about how she wants to move forward, and if she's willing to care for the child as if the child is her own? This is a very interesting case. I always find these because I have spent so many years in that field of work. I am always fascinated at how these cases, because each one of these cases is unique. This lets you know how soft the contracts are, because if the contracts were solid, it would be much easier for the courts to make decisions about this kind of thing, right? But they're not. This is really like a split the baby moment, right? It really becomes a split the baby moment. And how do you split a baby and let the baby live? McKenna is saying, well, we split the baby when they decided they wanted me to terminate the pregnancy. And I decided that, oh no, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to decide I'm going to give birth to the baby. I'll raise the baby as my own. I'm going to go to a state where I'm going to be protected, and where I'm going to be the one that's responsible. I'm going to be the mother. They are going to honor my rights as the mother because I gave birth, right? This is a real dilemma. Like, this is a real dilemma that the courts really don't have a remedy for. There is no established precedence for these type of situations. So this is why it has become so political. This is why it's taken on. And even they're saying that Donald Trump, the White House, has intervened into this. and has said that the baby needs to receive all life-sustaining measures. And in my video that I did yesterday, I talked about this. Like, the intended parents have requested for a restraining order on McKenna so that she cannot have contact with the child. But eventually, what could end up happening if the parents do not agree to preserve the life of this child and to protect the life of this child and not make any decisions that could be life threatening to this child, then the hospital could get a restraining order on them. Like, this is a really messy situation. And it is the reason why you have lobbyists on the Hill lobbying that more laws be created surrounding advanced reproductive technology and fertility, because right now every state is just like willy-nilly. What we are seeing with this is similar to like how you saw the argument over abortion laws, how we still see the argument over abortion laws today, right? Like, you, and when every state is doing something different, it makes it difficult sometimes to legally deal with these situations. Because every state, this is why Ruth Bader Ginsburg felt, and women's rights organizations felt like they needed to do something to spearhead an effort to get a federal decision on this, because that meant that, okay, this federal decision is going to be the law of the land. And you have lobbyists on the Hill every day lobbying to get legislation surrounding fertility law because of situations that arise like this. Most of these situations don't make it to this level. Like that attorney said, they are going to find some way to try to deal with them in the background, because they don't want things to be so public. You're talking about the life of a child, and that type of exposure could end up giving exposure to families that they don't want. And so a lot of times, when these dilemmas arise, they come to some type of terms of agreement when situations like this arise. Because you've had several situations happen along the years. You've had situations where fertility centers have mixed up embryos and put the wrong embryo into the wrong woman, right? And then you have a similar situation, and then it's like, who gets the baby? Who gets to keep the baby? The woman who thought she was carrying her own baby and and delivered this baby, and now finds out that the fertility center made a mistake, right? Now, she could sue the fertility center for making a mistake, but what good does that do for the custody of the baby? What does the law say about custody of the baby? Well, in most places, the paternity would establish that. But in some situations, who gave birth can override. And so then you have this same dilemma. So we've seen this situation, and that's to say each one of these are unique, but we've seen similar instances, and we have to kind of look at those outcomes. But a lot of those outcomes are negotiated amongst the parents and don't necessarily make it to the level that McKenna's situation is going all the way to. They have a court date. I believe they said the court date is on August 25th. And there are lots of interested parties in this situation. You have the attendant parents, you have and their legal team, you have McKenna and her legal representation, you have the state, and then now you have Donald Trump all the way from the White House weighing in on this. So there are a lot of interested parties in this situation, and hopefully it will help. Hopefully this situation will bring enough attention to those people on the Hill that they can try to come up with some things that will help to make these instances at least less complicated. And because there are some things that on the Hill they can agree to, right? that both the Democrats and the Republicans can agree with, right? Like when you look at the Take It Down Act, right? I talked to you guys about that with the cyberbullying, putting people's images on sexually explicit content, right? Um, that was a bipartisan piece of legislation. The Democrats and the Republicans agree, even in the hostile environment that they're in, because they both agree that sexual exploitation is not okay. And this is the reason why I always get after the people who are always talking about Me Too and Time's Up and all of these organizations being fueled by a bunch of Democrats. That is not true. You have Republicans and Democrats who both agree on that issue. They both agree on issues of child exploitation. And so what you see out here happening is happening by Republicans and Democrats. And like I said, when you just think about QAnon and how they go after, they labeled Donald Trump the Messiah in his first administration because he was supposed to be going after all of these people who were exploiting these children. So much of what you see propelled is propelled by a lot of that type of thinking. Right? But there are some things that the Democrats and the Republicans, despite the hostile political environment, they do still agree on. And I think that this is one issue where they can find some agreement on. And try to create something that would make it easier for families to navigate and litigate these situations, because and whether those decisions fall on the side of the intended families or on the surrogate, it's something so that they will have a guiding post, right? A street light that they can look to in the event that these situations happen. Because right now, it's nothing about these arrangements that are solid for either side. But I'm wondering if McKenna has some point that could be taken up in court and looked at by a judge, and a judge could interpret and say, when you all said that you wanted her to terminate the pregnancy, that was you all giving up your right to the child. And she moved according to that. I'm just wondering. I don't know. We have to wait and see. But I was thinking about that, and I wanted to bring that to you guys. I want to know what you guys think about it. Leave whatever questions, comments, concerns, suggestions you all have in the chat about this topic. But I just really was wondering, like, what if a judge does interpret it that way? The judge does have some foundation in order to justify his decision going that way, because she went to a state where whoever delivers the baby is the mother. But then you also have laws around paternity. Which one will win in this situation? How will the judge interpreting the breach of the contract that they had in another state? Will he even give any weight to the contract that they had in another state, to the agreement that they made in another state? These are all questions that hopefully will be answered sooner than later, but this could take years. What happens in the interim? This is a very interesting situation, but sometimes, like I said, there are situations that arise that cause something to be done about what is going on, the dispute, that will help bring some resolution to an issue that people haven't been placing attention on or focusing on. And maybe this will bring some attention so that then we can get some laws in place that will give us a guiding post for how we deal with these kind of situations. Because right now, this situation is not good for either side. It's not good for either side. I don't think overwhelmingly that you have people in this conversation that are overwhelmingly on one side or the other. I think this is really a situation where a lot of people can look at it both ways, right? And like I said, this is a true split the baby moment. But when you can't split the baby, what do you do? What happens, right? So I just wanted to come and tell you guys that because I was thinking about that a little bit this morning, and I wanted to come and get that down for those who listen to my channel, who record. And like I said, it was motivating me to bring this to my friends that I talked to on here, because we had a conversation when discussing Krishan Rock and Baby Junior about what do you do when you have a child who is born, or might possibly be born with an issue, and you have to make that choice. How do you make that choice, right? And this is like on steroids. This situation is on steroids. So I thought it was interesting. But there was one other thing I wanted to link this to really quick. So when I was saying that McKenna looked at how the breach of the contract was when the parents wanted her to get the termination, and then she decided she wasn't, and she looked at that like a breach of contract. I see her logic more in I see more of her logic than I do in this situation. But I thought that it made me laugh a little bit, because it made me think about Keefe D, right? And it made me think about Keefe D thinking that he was okay to come out and talk about his crime because he felt like Greg Caden came out here and talked about it first, and as a result, Greg Caden breached the contract. And I'm like, no, sir, you're not really like, he's not bound by a contract. You were bound by that proffer agreement, right? That you couldn't do that. That wasn't him. He didn't do the crime. He was the one investigating it. And now he's talking about experiences that he had being an investigator out in the open, which is something that people can do. You were the one who had the proffer agreement and was supposed to keep your mouth shut. And so to say that, right, when McKenna went with that logic, I kind of was like, okay, well, they wanted you to terminate. You decided you weren't going to terminate. But you're really the one who breached the contract. It wasn't them. But this is the thing. She still might have a stand, because it's different than the Keefe D situation. I just said that, y'all, because I thought about it, and it made me laugh about what Keefe D said, right? But the reason why I feel like she could potentially have a stand in her situation by saying that is because, okay, like I said, they paid her. So you can't pay money for someone to have a baby for you, right? That's not how those contracts are written up, because that's illegal. You pay someone for basically like the utilization of services. That's how it's kind of like written up. So it's like you're not paying for the baby, but you're paying for, you're giving this person this payment, this money. You are really paying for the baby. In reality, you are. I mean, let's not try to sugarcoat anything. You are really paying for the baby. But the way that these contracts are written up, they are written up a way that it's not really paying for the baby, because that's illegal, right? So, what could happen, she could end up being right on the custody side of this thing, but then end up having to pay back because of the civil part of this thing. You see what I'm saying? So there could be a part where a judge could decide that she is right and then award her custody of the child, maybe because saying, okay, when they made the decision that they wanted to terminate the pregnancy, that was her cue that they did not want the baby, and this is what she did. She gave birth. We're going to get the baby to her. It's possible that a judge might possibly do that. We don't know, especially in Texas. We don't know, right? We don't know. But she would find herself on the wrong side of the civil side, because when you look at the civil side of it, by her saying what she's saying, she's actually the one who breached the contract. because she agreed in the contract to terminate if that's what the intended parents wanted to do. That's what's being said. It's in the contract. So she could have one win on the custody side and then lose on the civil side. But this is the other catch-22. McKenna can go after those parents for child support, because the law is on her side with that. So there could be a situation where the courts give her custody because she's the one who gave birth to the child, and she could end up in a civil litigation owing them back some money. But then she could go to court and back to family court and request child support for the child. This is why I'm saying there needs to be laws legislated around this. This cannot continue this way. People are not going to stop. It is unrealistic to think, no matter what people think ethically about people using this way in order to have kids and what people are doing to have children, it's not going to go backwards. It's going to continue to transform over time and become more advanced over time. And so it's not going to go backwards. That people have found this new invention. They are going to use it to better their quality of life. That's how they look at it. And so now we have to create some governance around it, because this is going to muddy the waters for lots of people if there's no governance established. It just is. And it's going to interfere with children in their lives. And so it's something that, if we had proper governance in place, could limit the impact on kids. Y'all know I'm always the advocate for kids. When I'm going to speak about a subject, I am advocating about the kids. I'm looking at the kids involved in the situation. And so governance surrounding this does really need to be established so that it can try to limit the impact that it has on the lives of these kids and not drag it out so long. To where the children, it might be some temporary situation, and then another judge can come in and make another decision. Then you got to switch custody of the kids. No, that needs to not happen. There needs to be something there needs to be a legal remedy, and that legal remedy needs to be in the form of some type of governance initially, so that there's something established that we can deal with this in a faster manner than what a lot of these situations end up taking if it gets to a point of litigation. So on that note, you guys, I am out of here. I just wanted to come and lay that down with you guys this morning to give some more foundation to the situation. Like I said, I am keeping my eye out on this situation as well. And I believe I said that they had a court date on August the 25th. So I will be paying attention to that. Y'all know it's a lot going on in the month of August. August got it going, okay? We got Keefe D opening statements will start Monday. They got a jury. Opening statements will start Monday. We got Lil Durk. We got Yella Beezy. All starting this week, I think. I think it's tomorrow's the 17th, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, Thursday, I think Durk starts. And then the 24th, Yella Beezy, I think. Or it's the other way around. I can't remember which one. But at any rate, it's a lot going on. So we got a lot of stuff to cover. But I'm going to keep my eye on this story. Y'all know I'm always watching the circus. But with these trials coming, that's going to take more of my time, because I'm going to dedicate more of my time to that. I fool around with the extra stuff when it's not like real true crime. Even though I think we watching a true crime story, watching the circus, right? We watching a true crime story unfold with the circus. I dedicate more of my time to when something more thought-provoking is happening. So I will be probably paying more attention to what's happening on with Keefe D, Durk, and Yella Beezy cases. And so that's going to cut down some of the time I had to dedicate to watching what's going on in the circus. So if I fall behind, y'all just make sure y'all catch me up. I'll try to stay caught up with everything so that we can continue our conversation. But if not, I'll jump in and catch catch up with you guys when I can on it. And some days we might have a little bit of circus and then a little bit of court updates. So it just depends on how it goes. But I just wanted to come and give you that thing about McKenna. We're going to keep our eye out to see what's happening with little baby Gabriel. And I will talk to you guys soon.